For 80 years, humanity has lived with a paradox. The same scientific genius that unlocked the atom also handed us the power to orchestrate our own extinction. For decades, that power felt like a distant threat, a relic of a Cold War that had faded into the history books. But what if that feeling of safety was just an illusion? What if the complex systems designed to prevent the unthinkable are now the very things leading us toward it? A chorus of the world's most respected scientific minds, including Nobel laureates and atomic scientists, are delivering a message that is as clear as it is terrifying. It's a warning that the end of civilization isn't some distant possibility, but an imminent danger. According to the scientists who study this for a living, the mechanisms preventing our self-destruction are failing. The quiet, background risk that has defined the nuclear age has moved to the forefront of our reality. The world has grown complacent, misunderstanding the true nature of the threat we face. It's a threat that doesn't just promise war, but a complete and total collapse of the world as we know it. This isn't speculation. This is a conclusion based on scientific modeling, geopolitical reality, and the chilling mathematics of annihilation. We're standing at a precipice, and according to those who understand the forces at play, we are leaning forward, the illusion of safety. To really get the scale of this warning, we first have to unlearn what we think we know about nuclear weapons. Our collective memory often defaults to the images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, horrific, singular moments of atomic devastation. But today's weapons are vastly, almost incomprehensibly, more destructive. Many modern thermonuclear devices are not just tens, but hundreds of times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The 9 nuclear-armed nations currently possess a combined arsenal of over 12,000 warheads. To put that in perspective, the Nuclear Weapons Ban Monitor calculates that the active arsenal is equivalent to over 146,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. Many of these are kept on a hair-trigger alert, ready to launch within minutes of an order. For decades, a fragile peace was maintained by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The logic was simple. A nuclear attack would be met with an overwhelming counterattack, ensuring both sides were wiped out. It was a strategy of holding 2 guns to each other's heads, where the only winning move was not to play. But that doctrine is eroding. Geopolitical instability is surging. Long-standing arms, control treaties, the guardrails that kept the world from careening off the road have been systematically dismantled, or have simply collapsed. The director of the International Atomic Energy Agency has stated that the current geopolitical context is increasing the risk of nuclear proliferation. Nations that once felt secure under a superpower's nuclear umbrella are now questioning those guarantees, leading to an open conversation about acquiring their own arsenals. This isn't happening in a vacuum. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the group that maintains the symbolic doomsday clock, has moved its hands to just 90 seconds to midnight. This is the closest to global catastrophe the clock has ever been, closer even than during the most tense moments of the Cold War. They cite not only escalating nuclear rhetoric, but also the failure of world leaders to take the necessary actions to mitigate the danger. The warning from the scientific community is unanimous and stark. The period of perceived safety is over. The risk of a nuclear war, whether by accident, miscalculation, or design, is higher than it has been in generations. The first hour. So what does this imminent threat actually look like? What's the catastrophic chain of events that scientists warn is closer than ever? It begins with what military planners call a limited nuclear exchange. The International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, itself a Nobel-winning organization, has modeled what this would entail. Imagine a conflict where just a fraction of the global arsenal is used, perhaps 100 warheads, less than 1% of the world's supply. The first moments are defined by unimaginable physics. At the point of detonation, the temperature hits tens of millions of degrees, hotter than the center of the sun. A fireball erupts, expanding at nearly the speed of light, vaporizing everything in its immediate radius. A blast wave of compressed air follows, moving faster than sound, capable of leveling entire cities, turning concrete and steel to dust. This is accompanied by a pulse of thermal radiation, so intense it can cause third-degree burns and ignite fires miles away. In densely populated cities, these individual fires would merge into a single monstrous blaze known as a firestorm, an inferno so large and hot it creates its own weather system. These firestorms would be unstoppable, burning everything combustible and generating a colossal plume of thick, black, sooty smoke. This is where the local catastrophe becomes a global one. The firestorm's immense energy would heat this smoke, lofting it high into the atmosphere, past the clouds, and into the stable stratosphere. And it's here that the true doomsday mechanism is triggered. This isn't a hypothetical fear, it's a well-understood atmospheric phenomenon. The temptation is to believe a conflict like this could be contained, but experts warn this is a fallacy. Once the nuclear taboo is broken, the pressure to launch a retaliatory, or even preemptive, strike becomes immense. Communication systems would be crippled, leadership would be in chaos, and decisions worth the fate of the world would have to be made in minutes. The limited war becomes a global thermonuclear war in the blink of an eye. The science of collapse, the immediate horror of the blasts, is only the beginning. The long-term consequences, detailed in decades of peer-reviewed climate modeling, are what would truly end civilization. This is the science of nuclear winter. The massive quantities of soot injected into the stratosphere from burning cities wouldn't just rain back down. They would spread, first across the hemisphere of the conflict, and then globally. Within weeks, this dark layer of aerosolized carbon would form a shroud around the planet, blocking a significant portion of incoming sunlight. The effect would be immediate and catastrophic. Advanced climate models predict a sharp, devastating drop in global temperatures. Following a full-scale war between major powers, global average surface temperatures could plummet by nearly 10 degrees Celsius. For perspective, the change that ended the last ice age was only about 5 degrees Celsius, and it happened over thousands of years. This would be double that change, in a matter of months. Winter-like temperatures would persist year-round, for years. The growing seasons in the world's breadbaskets would be essentially eliminated. Photosynthesis would grind to a halt. The world's primary food, crops corn, wheat, rice would fail on a global scale. A 2022 study published in Nature, Food by scientists at Rutgers University, modeled these effects in stark detail. It estimated that a limited war could disrupt the climate so severely that it could lead to a famine threatening the lives of over 2 billion people. In the case of a full-scale war between the US and Russia, the models project that the resulting famine could kill over 5 billion people within the first 2 years. The survivors of the blasts would be sentenced to a slow death by starvation. This is the grim reality that is often ignored. It's a world plunged into a dark, frozen twilight, where agriculture ceases to exist, and the fundamental basis of human civilization, our ability to feed ourselves, is erased. The point of no return, the collapse of the food supply, would drive humanity's downfall, but it would be compounded by the complete disintegration of our interconnected world. The world after the bombs and the onset of nuclear winter is one most of us can't truly imagine. Global trade would cease instantly. The complex web of shipping, finance, and communication that moves food, medicine, and fuel around the planet would be severed. Every community would become an isolated island in a sea of radioactive winter. The electrical grid would be an early casualty, destroyed not just by direct blasts, but by the powerful electromagnetic pulse (EMP) from high-altitude detonations. This would plunge the world into a pre-industrial existence, but without the skills to navigate it. There'd be no running water, no sanitation, no refrigeration. Healthcare would collapse. Hospitals would be gone or overwhelmed. Without electricity or sterile supplies, even minor injuries would become death sentences. Disease would run rampant through a population weakened by malnutrition and radiation. And then comes the societal breakdown. Faced with starvation and freezing temperatures, the structures of law and order would evaporate. Governments would be gone. The conflict for dwindling resources would be brutal. This isn't just about the absence of technology. It's about the absence of trust, of community, of the very fabric of human cooperation. Even for those in remote regions untouched by the bombs, the fallout, both radioactive and societal, would be inescapable. They would inherit a broken, poisoned planet. As one retired Air Force Major General has argued, you cannot fight a war with these devices. They are devices of terror, because after you use them, what's left? The answer is nothing. A failed civilization on a dying planet. The message from the world's leading scientists could not be more clear. The threat of a civilization-ending nuclear war is not a relic of the past. It is here, now, amplified by instability, the erosion of treaties, and a terrifying public ignorance of the true consequences. We are closer to midnight than we have ever been. We've walked through the catastrophic chain of events, from firestorms to a decade-long nuclear winter. We've seen how even a limited conflict could trigger a global famine, leading to the starvation of billions. We've confronted the reality of a world without technology, medicine, law, or hope. It's easy to hear this and feel helpless, but the scientists raising this alarm do so not to paralyze us with fear, but to mobilize us with facts. They argue that political will is the only missing ingredient, and political will is driven by public demand. This is where the responsibility shifts to us. The first step is to reject complacency and to understand that if we get the nuclear problem wrong, nothing else matters. This isn't a political issue, it is an existential one. So, what can be done? We can commit to becoming informed and raising awareness. We can share this knowledge and break the silence that has allowed this threat to grow. We can support the organizations on the front lines, groups like the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, and the Union of Concerned Scientists who are working tirelessly for disarmament and risk reduction. Ultimately, the only way to truly eliminate this threat is the complete abolition of nuclear weapons. It may seem impossible, but it is the only goal that guarantees our survival. 80 years ago, scientists unleashed a power they could barely control. Today, their modern counterparts are pleading with us to put that power away for good. The Nobel laureates Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein issued a similar warning decades ago, and its words have never been more urgent. We appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity, and forget the rest. Our survival depends on it.